Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Red Raptor Writes. Things have been slow going, not much to talk about, so I figured this is a good time to talk about a big issue I've noticed coming out of Hollywood. Movies chasing fads, trying to be relevant to public opinion at the time, but quickly falling out of favor because of it. Movies that are dogs chasing cars.
I'm a dog chasing cars. I wouldn't know what to do with one if I caught it. I just do things.
Two good examples of this come from Disney, specifically The Force Awakens and Spider-Man Far From Home. Now, these aren't to be confused with movies that are dated. A film can be dated to reflect the culture and feelings of a specific time, yet still be timeless. Think about Casablanca, The Day the Earth Stood Still, Back to the Future, and Iron Man to name a few. They're each good to great works that reflect the general attitudes of their time. On the other hand, are movies that try to chase fads. Boardroom executives deciding to make a movie because, well, that's what's hip now.
How do you do, fellow kids?
I want to look at these two examples from Disney that I think have a lot in common in terms of why they were made to be the way they are, and why this ultimately led to their forgettability. Both were made not to explore a specific cultural outlook or idea, but to appeal to the latest fan reaction, or the Hollywood perception of it, which is a terrible idea when making a movie. Instead of creating a work of art that stands the test of time, what we got were two nets trying to catch a gust of wind. For a moment it's there, but the rush quickly fades. I'll try not to bash episode 7 or Far From Home too hard, since I don't hate either of them, but I think Disney put out two great examples of how not to come up with a movie pitch. So guys, what did Disney get wrong? How can we avoid chasing cars? Let's dig this up. A good place to start is with the first of the two to come out. Not Finn and Poe, but The Force Awakens. Dang, it's kind of hard to believe that the first Star Wars sequel came out 5 years ago. That's crazy. I remember watching it in theaters 3 times just because I enjoyed it so much. And man, I couldn't wait to see what came next. Oh dear.
We're all gonna die!
It sounds a little embarrassing to say now, but I really enjoyed Awakens, and I think most audiences agreed with me. Most moviegoers at least liked, if not loved it. However, there seemed to be a very vocal minority who, well,
I always hated it!
the most levied criticism being that, oh look, it was just a ripoff of A New Hope. Oh, guys, you're not smart. Don't think you found some secret flaw that unravels the whole experience. You know that was the point, right? Gosh, if I had a nickel for every time I heard that complaint, I would have made more than episode 7 itself. Between 1999 and 2005, the Star Wars prequels dropped, and guess what? Everyone hated them, except for kids, but I'll get there soon. The fans went on and on about how horrible George Lucas had become. YouTubers are still making feature-length videos on how terrible the prequels were years after their release.
George Lucas raped our childhood. George Lucas raped our childhood. George Lucas raped our childhood.
In order for Disney to appeal to all the fans who felt disenfranchised, they simply rewound the clock and gave what is essentially a beat-for-beat remake of the original, providing the illusion of the same joy and wonder that the boomers got in 1977. For the most part, it succeeded in bringing many fans back on the Star Wars hype train and making lots of money. So here we have a clear example of Disney cashing in on the sentiment of their target audience. People hate the prequels, right? And people want nothing more than to go back to the good old days, right? Well, if we just repackage the old stuff, it'll be a hit, right? Once again, this was Disney seeing the gust of wind in their net, but the victory quickly faded. Disney is a dog chasing cars. You see, not everyone exactly hated the prequel trilogy. An entire generation of impressionable youngsters grew up on them and learned to appreciate them, flaws and all, and trust me, there are many. I myself grew up watching the 6 films and loving all the video games surrounding them. Growing up, Star Wars was 6 movies, not 3. Yes, we all know how annoying Jar Jar Binks was, how bad some of the dialogue was written, and we noticed the over-reliance on outdated CGI. But once the rage train made it to the sequel station instead, many of the better elements came to light, like the political backdrop, some good world building, and a few fantastic performances. While I can't say any of the prequels are good, the idea of going back to the good old days fell out of favor. Part of this is because kids like me became teens and adults by the time of the sequels, and this is in part due to the Clone Wars further fleshing out the prequel trilogy, turning what many people hated into a beloved series. The final nail in the coffin, though, was of course the sequel to the sequel, The Last Jedi. Many fans, including myself, were willing to accept the blatant ripping off in Episode 7 because it seemed like a hook to ease us into a new story with new characters. A way to reel the fans back in. After seeing all of that crash horrifically like a horse dog in a Canto Bight casino, The Force Awakens had nothing to offer that wasn't time sensitive, relating to the feelings of the fans at that exact moment. But when those feelings changed, the perception changed, and there wasn't anything left. Unfortunately, Disney didn't learn their lesson the first time. Next up is Spider-Man Far From Home, never to be referred to as Spider-Man 2 because that would be straight up blasphemy. Far From Home's problems started with the Marvel film that preceded it, Avengers Endgame. Endgame was, to put it lightly, an emotional roller coaster. It was so intense and sad and amazing all at the same time. I mean, we finally got to see Iron Man take one for the team and make the sacrifice play. The one selfish playboy jerkwad progressed into a selfless hero and a family man who gave up everything to save the world. Oh, and who can forget Captain America, a man out of his own time who found that the modern world is a dark, morally muddied place that tramples on the freedoms he fought for. Then, after saving the world multiple times, he goes back to his home with the woman he promised to dance. Guys, Endgame was awesome, but that's the thing, it was perhaps a little too awesome. Perhaps. After this emotional roller coaster, Disney or Marvel specifically wanted a lighter, upbeat fluff piece of a movie that was 100% digestible and disposable.
Wait a minute. Hey, kid.
Yes, sir?
You're super nimble, right?
I sure am.
And small.
Very.
And 110% expendable.
I don't know what that means, but okay.
Now, I don't know if anyone actually asked for that, but it's what Disney thought we wanted, so it's what we got. Spider-Man Far From Home. FFH isn't necessarily a bad movie, but it's certainly one that I don't care to remember. With the exception of Jake Gyllenhaal, who needs back surgery for all the carrying he did, nothing about it really tried. I mean, Marvel got the same writers from the other disposable superhero comedy, Ant-Man and the Wasp, and went to work on Far From Home, a movie that's completely satisfied with being a total nothing burger. That's a shame too, because I think there was a lot of potential here. Seriously, the last one ended with Aunt May freaking out because her adopted son is secretly a superhero. Aunt May, a woman whose husband was murdered. It makes sense that she would freak out at her nephew being shot at on a daily basis. But switch over to the sequel, and it's a joke. Aunt May doesn't mind at all. Instead, going to events with Peter, cheering him on. Or what about his relationship with Michelle Jones? We saw the blossoms of friendship in Homecoming that could have become romance over time, but Far From Home didn't have time for that. Somehow, while he was dust, Peter fell madly in love with MJ, and no one knows why or how. It's taken as just another childhood crush like the first one. Even all the events of Endgame, the world being devastated for years, half of everyone turning into dust, then suddenly they all come back. Every crazy thing that happened between Infinity War and Endgame was only ever used as a joke. The world basically just ended, and right after, here are kids going on a field trip to Venice. Here are kids trying to fall in love. Here's a school system that works perfectly fine. Society's back to normal, and there are no consequences. And how convenient that every single character from Homecoming turned to dust. Wow! More no consequences. John Watts, seriously? I want you to try. No, it's okay, I swear, you can try. Homecoming was already pretty disposable outside of the last act. Now with the sequel, I was already introduced and on board with this interpretation of the character. But nope. Endgame happened, so now we need a road trip comedy. Well, at least we'll always have Thanos, and Thanos' car, and whatever this is. Look, I get it, Disney, Marvel. You don't want to keep giving us the same thing. I can respect that. But in 20 years, when I'm introducing my kids to the MCU, which movie am I going to install on my hologram? The super intense and thought-provoking spy thriller known as The Winter Soldier? Or the forgettable road trip comedy that never tried? In the years to come, no one will be thinking, well, Endgame was a lot for me, so now I need something light. No! That feeling doesn't exist anymore if it ever did. There shouldn't be excuses for not trying, because in time the excuses will fade while the lazy product still remains. Congrats, Marvel, you made another $1 billion, but at what cost? A popcorn flick that already nobody cares about. I've been on the YouTube scene for 3.5 years now, and my mind has changed on a few things I've discussed before. I'm human, I can change, and so do mainstream opinions.
Change? Yeah. Big change.
Feelings and attitudes towards some things shift. It's inevitable. This is why it's a bad idea to create a movie completely catered to a certain opinion. The flick might be appreciated in the moment, but once things shift, they'll find themselves not only outdated, but with nothing else going for them. The entire point of The Force Awakens was to rush nostalgia into the Star Wars fanbase that felt largely disenfranchised by the prequels. Once the prequel hate largely ended, the glory days were no longer longed for, and what was original in Awakens got ruined, public opinion turned. John Watts refused to make anything more than an unfunny road trip comedy with Spider-Man. Spider-Man! 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 Because Endgame was too dramatic, Far From Home is disposable filmmaking at its finest. Guys, I really hope Disney and Hollywood learn a lesson here. They made buttloads of money, so maybe not, but the quality of their films have suffered severely because they were acting as a dog chasing cars, trying to appeal to the latest shift in the fan base. It might make money, but it's a recipe for achieving the wonderful prize of forgettability. Next time, just try to make a good movie. Make the best movies you can. Please. Remember, if you enjoyed this video, to please leave a like, subscribe, and check out my social media. See you next time.